Laura Claiborne.
Here. Perfect time.
Chris Eskew. Representative Frank Kaufman.
Here.
Linda Lambert. Latrez Lepore.
Here.
Tony Leday. Leslie Lewis. Senator Beth Mizell. Representative Patricia Smith. Kelly Taylor White. And Tari Waheed.
Here.
All right, we just need a motion to receive the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, September 12th. Second?
Second.
All right. And then a motion to receive the consideration of the Early Childhood Care and Education Advisory Council quarterly report, quarter 3.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Well, good to see everyone. I hope everyone had a lovely Thanksgiving, and I appreciate everyone being here today. We're going to go through a number of updates. There is a lot moving and happening, and we'll just have a variety of team members jump in for the work that they're leading. So we'll switch presenters across the slides, but we'll try to walk through these rather expeditiously. So first, I'm going to ask Kate Eisler to walk us through the first couple of slides on activities from this past quarter.
Okay, so you can see that quarter 3 is particularly busy for community networks. They have to kick off the school year, which always results in quite a bit of intense activity. They work with sites to begin scheduling their fall class observations. They're reviewing their observation protocols, and so this year there were some additional requirements and changes made to the observation protocol. But what this means is we try very hard to have a consistent observation experience across the state between third party and local observers. And so there are protocols that the P-Card Center follows. There are protocols that call for the local observers to do a lot of those things consistently. There's also room for some individualization in certain areas of the protocol. So that is a big activity that takes place. Sites also began setting up classrooms in the Gold online system. In addition to all of that, we have put out a request for applications in response to legislation that was passed this summer for networks who are ready to take our activity and initiative in the state to the next level, to focus on local governance, access, and quality. We have, we're in the final review stages of 7 applicants, and we will be sending recommendations to the state board for the January meeting. So, in addition to what I just talked about, other activity that's gone on there's a lot of collaboration that goes on across lead agencies, in between lead agencies, across the state, sites from one lead agency to another. So sites worked with lead agencies to complete data certification. This is all in preparation for the performance profiles. In addition to everything else they were doing, they have to really take a close look at data to make sure it's accurate and that information is accurately reflected on the performance profiles. So lead agencies lead that work. They work with each individual site. In some of our larger metropolitan areas, that's quite a lift because oftentimes they are going to each site in person and sitting down with the child care center or the site director and looking at that data to make sure that it's accurate. They've completed coordinated enrollment self-assessment. What this means is this is an annual activity that we have undertaken with lead agencies for the past, what, Nasha, 4 years? Was this our 4th annual? So it allows us to take a read on where coordinated enrollment is in terms of progressing and implementing. So we have seen movement each year and improvement each year. I know those of you who work particularly and are involved as a site leader or director or community network leader, this is a difficult thing to implement. It really is. But the end result is to make programs more accessible, a uniform experience for families so that they know where to go. Things look the same in terms of accessing a seat across all programs. And so this self-assessment is something that lead agencies sit down and complete with their partners to really look at where they are and how they've progressed. The rest of this are things that we did, particularly with the results. For performance profiles, we conducted calls with each lead agency, not only the lead agency contact person, but the CEO, whether that was the superintendent or the head of their organization, if they were Head Start or a nonprofit, and looked at, reflected with them on what the results were saying and the stories there, and what they would do to share the results with their partners, and how they would act on those.
Great, thank you, Kay. Nasha's going to talk to us a little bit about the improvement process that's happening as a result of those, the class pilot that's coming up, and then our Early Childhood Leaders Fellowship, as Emmy O'Dwyer cannot be here today.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the site improvement planning. We've been working on this since August. We had 67 sites that were notified that they had to participate in the site improvement planning process. We have folks on the department staff, the field support consultants, who have been working with these sites to do a self-assessment, develop a plan, and base those plans on the individual site needs, the results of their self-assessment, and also to try to connect them to the resources that are available within their community, through their resource and referral agencies, through their lead agencies, the opportunities to access a high-quality curriculum through the department's curriculum initiative, and then mental health consultation, which is also a support available at child care centers. We are also piloting infant class. This is a prelude to infant class being required for all sites in next year. So in 2019-2020, all infant classrooms will be observed for practice, and then it'll be included for real in the rating in 2020-2021, which seems like a long time from now, but actually we'll be here in just what feels like a few minutes. So we are piloting the tool this year. This is building on a pilot we did last year. We're working with as many sites and as many classrooms as we possibly can to understand what infant quality looks like, how to use this tool. It is a little bit different to work with infant classrooms than it is to work with toddler classrooms. There is some overlap between the infant tool and the toddler tool. Paula knows all about this. So we're just trying to learn as much as we can this year, use the data that we get from that to help us plan for how to incorporate infant class into the rating and what that will look like. So this is a true pilot for us to learn really as much as we can from our leaders in the field who are stepping up to say, yep, I have infant classrooms and I want to know about the quality and I want to learn more about this tool before it's a requirement.
And I do just want to flag on this one, as well as on the improvement planning process, with regard to class, as we learn from this pilot, that'll be something that is coming before this group. So we wanted to, preview it here because we had an update, but also because there will be decisions and advisement for this group to be giving us your advice and feedback on taking the information we learned from this pilot to turn it into a fair and helpful statewide measure with regard to what's happening with our youngest learners. And then I would also say similarly with the improvement planning process, a year ago we started this with a very, very small number of sites. That went relatively well. We have expanded that to try to put more resources and energy behind those who need to do better and want to do better in our system to help move the state forward. At the end of the year and as part of the results next year, it'll be important for us as a group to look at how well those sites are or are not improving. I'm pretty optimistic based on the early discussions, but we have a long way to go, and it's really important, especially for our kids who are right now in the centers that are struggling the most. So are the sites that are struggling the most. So we will be continuing to loop back on both of these topics regularly from here forward.
And then this slide talks about the fellowship program for childcare directors that we are in the process of launching. So we are working on, or we have released a proposal for vendors to apply for, to basically tell us whether or not they can develop the materials and implement a fellowship for childcare directors that really helps set them up as instructional leaders within their own sites and then also across the state. They're piloting for 2019-2020, but hope to expand pretty rapidly. And the focus of the fellowship is really on in-person fellowship sessions that are both opportunities to get access to more information, but also opportunities to be collaborative and have a cohort of folks who view themselves as instructional leaders. Job-embedded coaching for directors that helps them to continue to improve their practice, and then communities of practice that allow them to surface common issues and find shared resolution.
And again, this is, comes from ideas that many of you all have helped generate over the years, which are, as we've learned so much and as we'll see in the data, we see success and improvement in every type of site that serves our youngest learners. Head Starts, child cares, and schools. But, child cares are unique in their positioning in a lot of ways and often don't have the benefit of, a centralized set of supports that you might have in a district. So this is an opportunity to try to address for the lack of sort of default collaboration and support that might exist for a child care director, and to provide more for our leaders in our child care centers to help continue developing them professionally and hopefully then have continued improvement of results in those sites as well. We're very excited about this work.
Yeah.
Great. The final thing I'll mention before we, Lisa Brochard is going to give us an update on CCAP and licensing work, is, as many of you know, because you have the great pleasure of serving on both groups, we have a early childhood commission that Senator Mizell and Representative Hilferty have been chairing that is doing some really important work around figuring out long-term sort of ambitions and strategy for where we want to be with regard to access and quality in the state. In other words, how many kids are we serving now and how well, and where do we want to be in the future? That group has met a number of times. They've learned a lot from a bunch of different national speakers about both Louisiana context and nationally. It's been a lot of really great discussion. For the past month, we've had a series of work groups. It's a very big group, so we've had some smaller groups working through what might recommendations look like from that commission to the legislature about where we need to go next as a state. And they'll be meeting again in middle of December to continue to move that work forward with the hope of having at least year one report done by the end of January. It is a 2-year commission, so I imagine the work will probably continue after that, but at least a first version to say, legislature, here are some ideas about where we are and where we might go. And so that'll be important, I think, point of discussion for all of us to continue to talk about in this group as well, and to inform the statewide strategy around early childhood wholesale. So thank you for those of you who have been working on that group. And if you're not part of that group and you want to be more in the loop there, especially as we're getting closer to the report number 1, just let us know. We'd love to bring you along in that discussion as well. All right, Lisa, an update on CCAP.
Excellent. So this slide just talks about the wait list. As you know, we have been processing the wait list. We've taken really over 4,000 kids off of the wait list. This gives you an age breakdown of those kids. It's not the not the total amount, because we started through age 13. About how many kids that are still on the wait list. We're still having about 3,000 kids, that are on the wait list. So we are pretty much wrapping up that piece as we speak now. So,
Please.
yes, please.
I have a question. Is it possible to get disaggregated data by network as far as wait lists?
Let me see. I don't know. Let me see.
So parish,
It is by parish on the
It is
website.
Oh, it is by
on the
parish?
website.
Yeah.
Wait list?
Yes.
Yes, the numbers on the wait list.
Okay, great, that's fine.
Okay.
Perfect. I can figure it out.
Okay. Good deal. Let me know, Marie, if you have any other questions. Any other questions on the wait list? Next, we'll talk about the criminal background check piece. As you know, we have been working on processing criminal background checks. We've processed over 31,000 criminal background checks since March. I think currently we're up to about 33,000 as of today. We are also working towards the reimbursement of the criminal background checks for providers. So those reimbursements have started going out. The deadline for folks to apply for their reimbursement is November 30th, so that's on Friday. And we're gonna be really, strict with that deadline there. But we are constantly working on getting those reimbursements out. So, any questions on criminal background checks?
Great job. Great job.
Yeah, that's really incredible.
Yeah. You have a good team. You have a good team. Licensing, as you know, we've revised the licensing regulations based on the task force that was developed last fall. We went to Bessie we went to the advisory council in May and then Bessie in June, and so they went into effect on November 1st. We've done a number of things to get the word out about the changes with licensing. We've done webinars, we've emailed the actual bulletin. We're about to actually mail out a physical bulletin because we do hear sometimes that folks just either can't get to it or they maybe don't have the most current copy. So we're going to go ahead and take it a step further this time around because it was a significant change based on the task force. We're going to go ahead and mail out the most current version of the bulletin with the changes highlighted so that folks can get to those changes really easily. And then we're also updating the training module, so that'll be coming out probably by the end of December. That will happen. But also there's a webinar on the changes online as well that has been sent out to all the providers as well. Any questions on Bulletin 137? And then looking at license centers over time, July, August, September, you see the different types, type 1, type 2, type 3. The changes, have not, they're still pretty stable for the most part, especially type 3s. So just wanted to give you those numbers there, which we do every quarter. Any questions there?
Great, good deal. The final thing we wanted to mention as part of the quarter 3 updates is that we are very excited that we have applied for yet another federal grant that has been made available for early childhood, which is great. This is the Preschool Development Grant that many of you have participated in the past. The downside is it's not for seats, as the current PDG grant was, although this one-year planning grant will lead to a seats grant. So it's a very important first step toward another, as we understand it from the Fed's, wave of seats to come, which has been very, very impactful all across the state, as you all know. So we have submitted a grant seeking about $10 million. The Feds have communicated that we will know this by the end of December. We're not totally holding our breath exactly for that timeline because this is one of those grants where we thought it was going to be out in, I don't know, April, and then it came out in September or something. So, stuff happens. It's complicated, the joys of bureaucracy. But we are very optimistic. Nasha Patel and our team captained this work. And it's an interesting grant because when you read it, it's essentially written in a way that is sort of nudges towards states that haven't built the infrastructure that you all have so thoughtfully built across the early childhood work here to begin planning to do that. Well, that's interesting in a world where we have, sort of the base element of that, but of course there's still so much left for us to do. And so we tried to balance it between saying, hey, we've taken some of the first steps, but also, we still have a lot to achieve here, and here's all the exciting ways we could build on the work that's already happened in Louisiana. Including supporting the Ready Start networks that Kay mentioned earlier as per the legislation, and thinking about how do we make sure community networks don't just help administer the day-to-day of early childhood, but help really drive improvement in the ways that so many of them have sort of started doing on their own, even though that's not their charge because they're such great leaders. Second, and we've heard lots of interest on this over the years, but how do we bring family homes more into the mix for supports? Not overreaching or over-obligating, but providing supports and resources and information to make sure that as many of our children are served in family homes all across the state, we're doing more to understand which children are served where and what resources exist that can help all of us serve all children better. continuing to provide more support statewide, including, for example, exploring shared services and opportunities we might have to help childcares, for example, realize efficiencies by pooling energies and efforts together to make joint resources cheaper, be it computer systems or food services or those types of things. And then, of course, the joys of data systems. All of our work would be enhanced and made easier if there were easier ways to share information across programs, providers, and agencies. And frankly, some of our systems are just antiquated. So it's an opportunity to get some additional funds to support that as well. And so we will see, fingers crossed. We're really optimistic, but eager to hear back. And as soon as we get word, we'll definitely let you know. I think if we do secure the funds, it's a real opportunity to just full throttle move even faster toward the plan that you all have laid out such a strong, first path on. And if we don't, I think, we still have plenty that we continue to move forward, but it would be very, very helpful in the budget times of today to have these additional funds to help us move forward. And again, this is a step one to then be able to apply for additional seats in a year. And so we are very hopeful that we will be able to secure those funds. And again, we'll let the group know. Nasha, would you add anything? Great. That's it for that item.
Okay, so do we have a motion? Do we need a motion to endorse, Erin?
No.
Just to receive, just a report.
Okay, all right, so then we have a motion to endorse, right? Consideration of proposed revisions to Bulletin 137.
Oh, did I think I did something wrong. Sorry. We have a couple of slides on the results. I'm sorry, this is my fault. I thought we had listed it as a separate item. It's totally my fault. So we're going to keep just going. Ignore that point.
Okay.
We did think it would be helpful to walk through with you all briefly some of the highlights of the results that just came out. As you know, you all have helped build the policies to measure the system statewide. We are now in our third year of results completed. These came out in early November, and I think represent some very exciting outcomes for our state overall. So I'll be brief here, and again, Nasha, you should jump in with any points you would add, but just to give you a sense of where we are in the results at this point. So our performance profile system, which is available on louisianaschools.com, we call it our School and Center Finder. It includes measures using the class tool, which, as you know, looks at teacher-child interactions all across the state, but it also has a number of informational metrics for parents. So ratios, teacher credentials, use of assessment, use of curriculum. The site also has even more just informational than that. What is the address of the site? Who is the director? What is their phone number? Do they have a Facebook page? Those basics, trying to put it all in one place for parents for ease of use of information. That is the vehicle through which we report these results year over year. This is our second year of using that site. The results of this system do have stakes in the sense that if a site is below 3.75, as Nasha spoke to earlier, they need to go through an improvement process to get better over time. If a site is unsatisfactory for a certain number of years, eventually that could mean they lose their public funding. That's a very small number of sites that even score unsatisfactory, but it is intended to make sure that those base level expectations are met all across the state, and we're responsibly spending public dollars with regard to early childhood care. On the incentive side of things, as you all know, many of you helped develop these, Louisiana has very enviable to other states tax credits that support the centers and the teachers in sites that earn certain levels of performance rating. So the more stars, the higher the tax credit. I think you all know this pretty well, so I won't go into great detail, but it is important that this system is a robust set of measures. It gives information to parents, but it also comes with incentives and consequences, both positive and negative, to motivate our system and all of the adults involved in serving our youngest learners to improve year over year over year. And unsurprisingly, I think that's what's happened. Basically, no matter how you slice this data, we have seen positive outcomes, which is so exciting to be able to celebrate together. So we saw every domain of class, all the parts that class values in the research of teacher-child interactions improved. Every site type improved. So your average Head Start score, your average child care score, your average school score all went up this year. We have more excellent and proficient sites, which is where we want everybody to be, than we've ever had before. We're at 77% across the state. And at the top of that, just to really emphasize the excellent point, we have more excellent sites than ever before. And this is an incredibly rigorous bar to achieve. Those of you that know the class tool know how hard it is to earn excellent. We went from having only 40 sites statewide last year to more than doubling that to 90, which is, it is truly an incredible outcome, and we are so, so proud of those sites and the community networks for the work that happened there. We saw all of our local observer accuracy rates in almost every single domain and overall improve, which is really exciting to see. We're getting more accurate and better depth of understanding of the tool all across the state. But of course there's room to work, you know, so I say all of that in great celebration and very proud and excited about the outcomes, but knowing, and we said this as part of the release and in our conversation with community networks, there's still a lot of work to do. So the two big things that stand out to us, neither will surprise you. The first is when you look at our class results, as we will in a moment, the instructional components continue by far to be the lowest level of success. Many would say it's the most difficult, but it's the thing we've got to keep at to make sure we're maximizing our time with our youngest learners. And then second, and this is what the commission that Senator Mizell and others have been leading has been really focused on, we have an access problem. So as a state, we're doing a pretty great job serving 4-year-olds. The vast, vast majority of economically disadvantaged 4-year-olds have a seat, and the vast, vast majority of those seats are proficient or excellent, which is great. However, when you look at economically disadvantaged 3-year-olds, or especially economically disadvantaged children 0 to 2, we are serving far fewer. So we're at about 1/3 of economically disadvantaged 3-year-olds and only 7% of economically disadvantaged children ages 0 to 2. That's not to say that every family wants or needs services. That's not what I intend to imply, but it is to say that it's hard to imagine that of all the economically disadvantaged infants in the state, only 1% of parents is looking for services for their child. That's just not real. And so the reality is we have a lot to do as a state to figure out where do we go from here to learn from the lessons and successes we've seen with 4-year-olds and see what it looks like to have a robust system of supports all across birth to 5 as much as we can. And so the commission has been having very healthy discussions about this in debate. I imagine their report will speak to this, and obviously will be continued discussion on this as well. Slide 17 shows you over the past 3 years how the scores have changed, and so these bars are all headed in the direction we want them, which is always exciting charts to show you. You can see now that we have 71% of sites are proficient, 5.7% are excellent, very few are unsatisfactory, and about 1/4 of sites are at approaching proficient. So we feel good about the direction this is headed. Again, still more work to do, but headed in the right direction. This next slide shows you for each domain of class, the outcomes there. And here you can see in every key piece that research tells us matters for youngest learners, our early ed educators are improving in the way they're able to deliver those services across the state. But of course, as I mentioned before, the sort of instructionally focused elements of this, instructional support, engaged support for learning, are by far the lowest. So the distance between where that performance is currently and the other measures is significant and something that we've been working on, we'll keep working on. And, you know, this is the challenge of moving a system this large, and so we'll stick with our partners and keep trying to move this forward in the coming years.
Can I actually say that?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The instructional support, the grade is low. Is that because the materials are not being provided, or the outcomes are not being, what exactly, I'm not sure exactly what that covers.
I almost added in when you spoke. So I work not only at Cherry Tree, but also work very closely with Teach, Don't, and Implement the class in the 16 classrooms I run. Instructional support is by far the most difficult domain to score higher on and even to grow within, because what we're talking about are things like concept development, language modeling, and quality of feedback. And these dimensions require a lot of intentionality, a lot of depth, and duration. So when you look at bringing concept development into a classroom, you're really looking at having children, well, how does that happen? Why did that happen? Think deeper about something. Whereas when you look at emotional support and you look at classroom organization, emotional support, most of our teachers have that warm, fuzzy, feel good. So when you really look at that instructional support, it's difficult. And as a center who, is still trying to work towards that, we've got that teacher turnover, and it's trying to continue to engage those teachers on what it looks like, showing them. So it's not just everybody's going to get this wonderful class on instructional support and then you go back and deliver it. You have to continue to deliver PD on it, continue to practice it in different ways. I see Michelle next to you nodding her head. It's just not something like, the new approach that Teach No puts out is the no, see, do approach. So at this point, I think most of the state knows what it looks like. They might be able to see it, but to go back and do it, which is why we have the MMCI piece in there, is very difficult. It takes time. For some teachers, it's very natural, but for others, it's going to take a lot of practice.
So that measure though indicates the engagement of the teacher with the mental stimulation of the child more than.
It's deepening the understanding of a concept. It is exposing language. It's questioning, a long back and forth exchange. So it's that overall instructional.
So that's what the observers grade.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, back in the old days, way old days. Okay, so when I see instructional support, I'm thinking, oh, there's a curriculum provided. There's a lesson plans in a classroom. You go beyond that into the connection being made mentally with the child.
We are not holding up flashcards. What color is this?
No.
What number is this?
Right.
Well, wait, why do you think it's green? Wait, oh, we can have green and red and, yellow apples. Well, where do they come from? Where do you get? I mean, the child
Right.
is really having to think, and the teacher is having to push that child to think at that deeper level.
Yeah, it's not a flat dimension between the two. So that's absolutely.
It's incredibly
It is
difficult.
incredible.
Yeah.
But that's wonderful.
It is.
wonderful.
And you see
Because
as an
you're
observer,
opening something in that child's thought process.
you see the light
Right,
bulb go
right.
off. That was it. That was it. And that's the goal. And for teachers who are kind of new to it, it may not come as naturally to those who've been doing it and polishing it up for a
If
while.
I could share some little memory that you just brought to me. I had a teacher in my 4-year-old class, and I'm in the office, and I hear her telling the 4-year-olds about rainbows. And, I'm listening to her, and some of the kids would respond. And she came out and I said, it's probably not age appropriate for you to explain the scientific basis for how the rainbows are made. And she said, they're going to think about it, and they ask her questions about it. So I'll have to call her.
She was ahead of her time.
Exactly. Thank you for that time.
Absolutely.
I will say, Senator Mizell, we do, as you know from the work of this group, there has been a lot of energy spent on high quality curriculum and making sure that as much as we can support that, especially in childcares who often don't otherwise have the funding, we're getting high quality materials in the room. And Teach Joan helps with this. There's obviously a connection between executing what class wants of teacher-child interactions with good materials being in the room. So we try to make the connection between those two things, but it's our belief that having the tier one high quality curriculum in the room helps then the teachers more easily be able to execute against this and think about the right questions to ask and that type of thing.
I was going to say, my personal experience is the teachers you see that are making steady progress and improvements when it comes to instructional support is directly correlated to the fact that they're using this teaching method, this teaching practice daily. Because if you try to do it just on the day the observation goes on, you're not going to get the feedback from the kids because they're not used to asking probing questions and deeper questions and pushing the conversation to a whole nother level. Even though that level sometimes may take a 90-degree turn and go some ways totally different, which opens you a whole other avenue of taking wherever they went. You don't necessarily have to bring them back. You can expound on where they went with the conversation.
But wouldn't you love part of this grade to be the conversation in the car when the parents pick up?
So.
Maybe not always.
Which I think might skew those results even more, but yes.
So I think there's a correlation of rising scores on teachers who are actually trying to implement this on a daily, reoccurring basis. Because I see sometimes teachers struggling not giving the feedback because they're not necessarily using it every day in that level. And therefore the children don't know I'm supposed to be bouncing questions back. I'm supposed to be probing deeper. I'm supposed to be asking more meaningful questions back.
But Senator Mizell, it's also important to note that even small gains in that instructional support net huge gains in the end, so it just because you go, from a 4 to a 4.75, there's still much to be said about that.
Yeah.
And I think also, Senator, there is a quality to be added if you have the parent support, because hopefully the parents are what's going on in the classroom. It really starts at home. That's the first learning environment, and hopefully that environment is preparing them for that school environment, and those two environments are working together. So there is
building.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for your time on that.
The next couple of slides, and I apologize for the font size of 2 on your slides. I think you have this electronically, but I'm not listening to that as well. But this breaks down just further. So it takes the domains of class, and they call them dimensions. These are just more detailed versions of what is being measured here. And so you can see, again, we've had improvement across each of the dimensions as well. This is a small scale. It's a 7-point scale, so you're not ever going to see, 2-point jumps year to year. That would be weird if we did. But we are seeing an inching upward, which for a system of 1,500 sites is pretty exciting to think about. We have the same thing here for toddler, and common trend there as well, sort of regardless of age of what's happening. This slide, this is slide 21, just explains when we group by program type, as we call it, who we're including where. As many providers often have many hats and involved in many types of programs, so this just clarifies for you who's grouped where. But more importantly, the point of this is slide 22, which is to show you what I said at the beginning, which is, I think, probably most impressively of this work all across the state, thanks to the uniting together, working as one, building networks across communities. We are seeing improvements not just in schools and not just in child cares and not just in Head Starts, but across all 3. Which is a real testament to the work of our communities on this. There are provider types that average slightly higher than others, but there's overlap here. So it's actually on the next slide, which is really hard to read, but better on the screen. You can see here in our lovely box and whisker plots the spread of programs. And so not only are schools and Head Starts and child cares improving, but we have excellent, I shouldn't use that word, we have really strong programs across every type of program. So there are really great child cares in this state showing everybody how it's done. There are really great Head Starts doing the same thing, and there are really great schools doing the same thing. I think, there was sometimes a theory going into this work 6 years ago that schools were just going to hold the bar up here and child cares are really going to struggle, and that is true in some cases, but it's not uniformly true. And we have leaders in every program type, and we have those, unfortunately, who are still struggling in every program type. The good news is our excellent sites, especially that I mentioned at the beginning, those 90, they're all across the state, which presents such an opportunity for us to learn from our neighbors down the street what is possible with all children and how to execute and facilitate really great learning all across the board. So we're very, very optimistic and inspired by the work that we're seeing across all program types.
Jessica, do you have any idea, I guess, of the explanation for the outliers, why there's such a huge outlier in school program?
Yeah, there often when it's used so differently, there's something particularly odd happening at the site. I don't know that dot in particular, but Nasha, you may have more context to add.
So a couple things to note. School includes both public and non-public schools, so that can also explain some of the range, but Jessica's right that there's like specific circumstances that can be attributed sometimes to some of the outliers.
So there might have been some sort of weird teacher issue that happened, or a lot of observations had to be thrown out, or it's very rare, but it does happen. That's true both when you see this sort of the weird outlier score, but it's also true when you look year to year. We see typically people are inching up, but if you see any sort of significant swings, positive or negative, it typically means we had some sort of leadership change. Sometimes that was the right step and you see really positive change as a result. Sometimes there was turnover that was problematic and that will result in a difference. Again, because this tool is so driven by what educators and adults are facilitating children and with what skill. And so, you know, as much as anywhere, the teacher in front of the room really, really, really matters.
How does it, I'm sorry, how does it break down in terms of age group? When we're dealing with school, we're talking about 4-year-olds, right? Head Start and early Head Start, that can be anywhere from 0 to 5. Then child care again, similar. So how does that fare among the groups?
Yeah, Nasha, I don't know if you want to jump in with thoughts here.
Schools, there are, so again, because schools have non-publics included in there, and some non-public schools do have childcare attached to them, there is birth divide in every one of those years.
Okay.
And every one of those program types, I'm sorry.
But I would also say the results on, and tell me if you feel like this is a mischaracterization, the results on the toddler tool and the results on the pre-K tool, we see pretty strong relationship between those two. The state averages are roughly the same, so it is not true universally that everybody gets the exact same score on each of those, but there seems to be somewhat of a relationship, and so I don't know that it would make a huge difference, although it might depending on context. This final slide 24, before we get into networks, is a breakdown of those informational metrics. So you'll remember I said at the beginning of this, each profile includes how is the site doing on class, but also other information for parents, including do they use high quality assessments with children? What are the ratios in the building? Do they use a high quality curriculum? And what percentage of their teachers are certified? And you can see here the breakdown against those practices by site. We were talking about this earlier today with a smaller group, and I will just mention for some of these where the numbers are interesting or have changed over time, it's important to note that these are reported to us in a self-reported way. We check them for accuracy where we can. So for example, certification, we started essentially auditing this year, but it is self-reported, and some sites just don't send us their information, which means we can't brag about them and the fact that they might be doing X or Y or Z. So there are small missed opportunities around the edges there, but in general, you know, here's where we are. And I would just say, especially on the curriculum point, per Senator Meisel's question earlier, we've seen huge gains here in the number of sites that are using high quality curriculum to help support their teachers and their children. So we're very excited about where that number is. These next couple of slides walk through the network results. So this is if you take every child care Head Start and school in a community and average it together, as is led by the lead agency in the community network, what happens. And what you see here is that we had 57 networks all across the state that improved their score. And the vast majority of our networks are now proficient. We have a few remaining approaching proficient networks, but the vast majority are proficient. The average score is a 5.03. And then you can see, I think probably, particularly I've noticed this slide that shows when you look at each of the networks compared to the state average, who is above and below. It's not 50-50 because we're averaging all of the observations together, not each network against each other. But it is true that, as has been true for a couple of years, we continue to have more struggles in the northern part of the state. And I think argues for continued work with our community networks there, our resource and referral there, and our school systems there to keep trying to improve those numbers in particular. There's not a wild swing. Again, the vast majority of these, I don't want to be doomsday about it, the vast majority of these networks are proficient, as are the vast majority of our sites. But it is interesting that there's such a difference in part of the state, as we were discussing some of us a little bit earlier today. The final thing I'll mention, and then would love any questions or feedback or reactions you have for us. You know, we really do try in this system to build incentives and consequences that motivate our educators to do better by our kids every single day. But also to really call out and celebrate those excellent educators across the state who are just showing what is possible. And so we had 3 honor rolls again this year. We had an excellence honor roll, we had a top birth 3 honor roll, and we had a top gains honor roll. We released these actually the week before the big LouisianaSchools.com is live release. In an attempt to help really elevate what I think some people are just still not used to getting, right, which is information about the quality of Miss Susie's child care down the street. And so we released these the week before, again, to try to say, hey, everyone, pay attention, and to really celebrate excellent sites all across the state. So this is always a fun part of the job in the release when we get to call people and tell them that they've earned these designations. We send them a certificate, we send them a logo that you'll often see on like Mardi Gras banners and t-shirts and all of that kind of stuff. And then we also just promote this to media and publicly on our site so that parents and communities are clear about excellent for a variety of reasons sites that exist all over. And this just shows you for excellence, we had excellent sites of all types. For birth to 3 honor roll, same thing. And then for top gains, same thing. So there was a child care, a Head Start, and a school, at least, and often multiple, that achieved every single one of these designations all across the state, about 300 total, that for a variety of reasons we were able to celebrate, and some of them earned more than 1 designation, by the way, which was very exciting to see.
I want to add that the gains that I've observed in the programs tend to relate to the fact that we're doing more coaching. We're doing more mentoring and coaching, very much so directly in the classroom, and specifically intentional coaching. And I think that has really assisted in upping the scores to the point where we find that that's very effective.
That's great. Any other questions or reactions on these data? If you haven't, I'll make a shameless plug that you check out LouisianaSchools.com. I really love it. I'm that mom on Facebook that when the moms group, somebody posts, oh, where, I'm like, here you go, shameless, go to this website my team makes. But in all seriousness, it's very helpful. You can go in and search by your address. You can search for a particular site. You can save your favorites. You can compare. It has all sorts of really cool features. Frankly, a bunch of other states across the country have started copying us, which is a nice position to be in. But we also try to make that site and this release better year over year. So in all seriousness, from a feedback perspective, as a user of that site, if there are things that are hard to navigate, information you think we should be promoting, ways we've talked about things that are confusing, let us know, and we really work year over year to try to improve that, and we love your feedback on this. And I also just think, we have continued education to do here. As I said, I think my neighbors down the street aren't used to the fact that there is information this specific about the quality of various early childhood providers. And I think you all have such a bully pulpit to be able to talk about that to anyone and everyone that will listen, see my neighbors, and talk their ear off about this. And I would just encourage you to do that. And the website's just an easy way to plug people into what that looks like and how to access the information. Okay. Nasha, I don't know if we need to add anything about this slide. We're good? Yeah, Nasha talked about the infant class and timeline, so I'm not going to go through this slide in particular, but if you have questions about it, we can talk about that as well. Now, at this point, we have wrapped up the quarterly report, so sorry about that.
That is okay. So Lisa is going to present the consideration of the revisions.
This is a long slide, so get your reading on it.
Just wait for it, just wait for it. I think we need a motion to receive it first.
Can we get a motion? Second? All right.
Good deal. So just really quick, we're going to have one technical change to Bulletin 137. is as a result of the legislative auditor report, which we really appreciate and we take to heart. There's one change about permissive language in regarding fines. The statute allows for a permissive fine, and so we want to mimic that in our bulletin because that is how we do our practice with the fine. So it's really just a technical change, but it's to be consistent. So we're going to make that change.
So do we have a motion to endorse? Second? Thank you, Tim.
Good deal. Well, that's the quickest bulletin 137.
Okay, and now we just need a motion to receive consideration of proposed revisions to Bulletin 996. We have a motion to receive. Beth? Second, Tony?
Great. So I'm going to pass it to Erin Carroll, who leads this work for our team in just a moment. But as you know, we have built with your support, guidance, and feedback along the way, an effort that we've called the Early Childhood Ancillary Certification in an attempt to build training, supports, and professionalization among the early childhood provider space. And we are now sort of through the, dare I say, the pilot building phase of this, which means we need to start to codify this work in the coming months. So Erin's going to just walk through a quick refresh of what we've done and where that leads us, and then also just talk through what this bulletin achieves, which is essentially a codification of the steps we've taken thus far for future work.
Okay, so as Jessica mentioned, we're going to just quickly kind of touch on the background, how we got here, what the ancillary certificate is, and then this is actually about bulletin revisions to 996, which is not one of our common 3, though those of you who were on the council back in, believe it or not, December 2014 did see it once before, so it has come back around. So the ancillary certificate program, so it was in December 2014 when we first brought the Early Childhood Ancillary Certificate to the Early Childhood Advisory Council and then to Bessie at the following meeting after that. There were 2 key pieces of the policy that we established at that time. So the first was the establishment of the actual certificate. So this is the requirement that all of our lead teachers working in Type 3 childcare centers have the ancillary certificate as a minimum credential if they've been working for 24 months as a lead teacher. So I've talked to this group about that many times, but this is the credential that childcare lead teachers can earn by showing that they have completed one of 4 other credentials, one of which is a CDA, a technical diploma, associate degree, or bachelor's degree. The second key piece of that policy was around where the training for the Early Childhood Ancillary Certificate is completed. And so this is a little bit more complicated, but what we're talking about today. So the second part, and this is really essential, added a requirement that teachers who are completing their ancillary certificate through a CDA or technical diploma, which are 2 most popular ways, specifically the CDA, must attend a preparation program that has been approved by Bessie. So this was a really big change to the way that we think about CDA preparation, which has traditionally kind of been composed by different professional development a teacher may have done over the past 10, 15 years. They get to that 128 hours, do a professional portfolio, and go. This created a change that we now have preparation programs that teachers go to. So the policy requirement for this was that beginning July 1, 2018, so just this past summer, teachers that are beginning to prepare for their CDA to use towards the ancillary certificate must attend one of these Bessie-approved early childhood ancillary certificate programs. So we have been working on this really since 2015. Since this policy got established, we have been working to build a set of statewide providers who can offer this training, and we've done this through a program called Believe and Prepare Early Childhood. So we've talked about this. It's been in every quarterly report ever, updates on the progress that we've made with it. We did 3 cohorts of Believe and Prepare Early Childhood, the first of which was in 2015. So Believe and Prepare Early Childhood was a grant program that was offered to teacher preparation programs that were interested in becoming BESI-approved ancillary certificate programs. So we received applications from all types of providers. Some were higher ed, community colleges, technical colleges. Nearly all of our child care resource and referral centers applied and went through the process. We've had school districts, we had a high school, we've had a wide variety of people participate in the 3 cohorts of Believe and Prepare Early Childhood. The way the grant worked is we received an application from a program that was interested in getting approved. We provided them some startup funding to work on their application for program approval. And then 3 to 6 months after that, they submitted their application for program approval to BESI to become an approved early childhood ancillary certificate program. So this was staggered. There was funding associated with the startup, and then funding once they got that BESI approval to help them get set up to launch and provide that first cohort of candidates the programming. And so it was through that we have really established this set of child care teacher preparation programs called Early Childhood Ancillary Certificate Programs. I want to stop and talk a little bit about what the really unique features of these programs are. We've been doing this for a long time, and sometimes I think we as a state don't realize just how unique of an approach this is, but it is truly a really unique approach to preparing child care teachers. So the Early Childhood Ancillary Certificate Program is built on that national credential, the CDA credential, which requires that 120 training hours, it requires a professional portfolio, it requires the passing of a standardized test, and a visit to watch the candidate perform. But what these programs do is, yes, meet all of those requirements, but they really do some very unique features as well. So on average, these programs are offering 30 hours of applied practice experiences embedded in that coursework. So either that's coaching and mentoring that's happening associated with the content they're covering in their coursework, or maybe the candidate does a video of themselves using a technique and submits it. Maybe it's a PLC, professional learning circle done either in person or online. Various different applied practice mechanisms, which is not what you would typically see in a CDA preparation program. We have a strong focus on the types of assessments in these programs that are done. So yes, they need to be able to pass a standardized test, but we also want to make sure that they can really, that the teachers can really apply the skills that they're learning in their coursework. So we ask that assessments really be practice-based. So watching the candidate do the skill that you're teaching in the coursework to make sure that they're really ready to move on. And then finally, the very essential, these programs are built with a lot of collaboration from the Early Childhood Community Network. So in order to get BESI approval to offer one of these preparation programs, there is a requirement for formal partnership between the Early Childhood Community Network. However, as the nature is of the early childhood community, there's already quite a bit of overlap just as far as who has the expertise. So I think probably even without that formal requirement, there would be a lot of participation. But we really want to make sure that the Early Childhood Community Network and the lead agency are looped into what's happening with those programs. One other, this is actually the really essential piece. Candidates do receive financial support to attend these programs, so this is kind of the key feature here. So our Louisiana Pathway Scholarships are available to cover the cost of tuition to attend a BESI-approved Early Childhood Ancillary Certificate program. They cover the full cost of tuition as long as the program stays within the limit, which all do, which make it, a very affordable for teachers to do.
Aaron, before you move on, the inclusion of the minimum 2 class observations, does that count whether or not you successfully complete the course? Is there a standard? Secondly, is there a standard score?
That's a great question. So I went through that a little bit quickly, but yes. So As part of the applied practice, all of these programs also include at least 2 full class observations. These are class observations that are used for practice. We do have some programs that use them to measure success and progress of candidates. However, we've really pushed away from doing a standardized score. They cannot be, and they are not related to the class observations that they're receiving for the performance profiles. It's really meant to be a professional growth practice. And some of them do that as like a series of mini class observations. Some do it as full class observations, but it's really just practice. Okay, so really through the Believe and Prepare Early Childhood program, we now have, it's hard for me to believe, but 22 early childhood ancillary certificate programs around the state, most of which are operating right now. So these cover a wide range of provider types and backgrounds. So 11 of them are associated as institutions of higher education. So 5 community or technical colleges is included in that. 4 of them are professional development companies. 5 of our child care resource and referral agencies, and 2 school districts, including 1 high school Jumpstart pathway. So that's an opportunity where high school students can actually get this while they are still in school. Key features that we have learned along the pilot way is that we need to keep these programs flexible to the candidate needs, right? So the teachers that are attending these candidates are working full-time, for the most part, in a child care center. So 8 of them provide online coursework, if not 100% partially, some portion of it online. I will preface, none of these programs are 100% online. Even if their coursework is 100% online, they still have in-person meetings, they still have class observations, they still have people that are accessible to them locally. And then all programs have really provided a lot of flexibility in scheduling. This is another area where the community network partnership has been really important. We've learned from our community networks, you know, it looks like it might be best in this region to have classes on Saturdays, or it looks like it would be best to do them on a Tuesday night. They're able to kind of get that feedback from local partners when they're setting that up. So it is through this piloting process we have been working with and approving these ancillary certificate programs that we have right now. Because we have reached 22, and we are still continuing to expand their geographic reach, but because we have reached 22, we're not offering the Believe and Prepare Early Childhood pilot anymore. We have gotten to a strong and solid place for what these programs look like. So at this time, we need to put the program approval process for these preparation programs into policy to make sure that we are standardized and we're operating really in the same form and process as a traditional teacher preparation program would. So the policy that you have in 996 in front of you outlines what that would look like. This is the same process, the same expectations as we have used for the Believe and Prepare Early Childhood pilot. So it outlines what is required in that application for program approval. In the first portion, it aligns the timeline and communication procedures for working within a program that was seeking approval with that of the K-12 process. And then it establishes what the minimum requirements are for early childhood ancillary certificate programs. These are identical to what we have been doing with the pilot process. Any questions about this process or anything I just said? I know I went a little fast.
I have a question. Do you think at some point this program will be offered to co-teachers?
To assistants? So it actually has been opened up. That's a great question. So previously, when we first started the Early Childhood Ancillary Certificate programs, we said that scholarships were only accessible to lead teachers because we really wanted to make sure that we were getting the lead teachers in so they could meet that 2019 requirement. We heard from a lot of folks that, you know, we have a lot of assistant teachers who are new and they want to become lead teachers. They're the ones that are actually committed to doing this work. And so we have expanded that option so that's actually accessible now. We do ask that when an assistant teacher is applying for a scholarship that their director provide some recognition or commitment that, you know, that individual is committed to the field and that they will likely become a lead teacher in the next several years when a position becomes available. The reason for that is that often we know assistant teachers are brand new to the field and it is a financial investment.
Thank you.
So this last slide is just talking about what we are continuing to do. So the policy that we're looking at now really sets the requirements for what it would be for new programs to get approval, and I'm sure we will continue to get applications for new programs. However, we are still, you know, finalizing what we need to manage the programs that we have now. So I mentioned that we have 22 around the state. We feel that's a good number, but we're working with those 22 programs and likely new programs to expand the regions that they cover. So there are still uncovered parishes of the state, and even in parishes that have a provider, there may not be enough space to cover what we think the expected need is based on turnover and how much childcare we have in that region. So we're doing that in two ways. One, we're encouraging our successful existing ancillary certificate programs to think about how and if they want to expand and cover new regions. The second and probably more direct solution to this is a statewide contract with Early Learning Louisiana, who actually comes out of the University of Florida. So this is one of our online but reinforced providers who they're our most recently approved provider. We have contracted with them to expand over the course of the next year and a half to serve in every parish. So that means that I think it is by December 2020, every single parish will have at least one option, but likely more than one option available to them through that Early Learning Louisiana. The second piece that we're working on is building an on-site review process. So as we are formalizing this in policy now, the approval process, we will also eventually be formalizing the review and support process for approved early childhood ancillary certificate programs. So this will include some type of on-site review in which programs receive visitors and receive feedback on how their program is working. This will follow a similar pattern with piloting and implementation to what we've seen done in K-12. And we would expect that to start being piloted as soon as next fall. Questions about either of those pieces?
So we'll need a motion to endorse. Dr. Dinka, and a second? Second. All right, thank you. All right, so we are on that last line item there, so happy holidays to everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming. We are adjourned.